Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, November the 14th, 2020. It is currently 11:09 a.m. Central Time, and you're listening to the Theology Central podcast. And the reason I'm telling you it's the Theology Central podcast is because this episode may be picked up by people who don't typically listen to us, and it may be picked up on certain apps where people don't really know a lot about us, because in this episode of the Theology Central podcast, we're going to be talking about a brand new song. We're going to be talking about the lyrics of that song, and we're going to be doing so from a theological perspective. So let me just try to explain first to possibly the new people listening. Let me explain what this podcast is about. This podcast, it has a very simple premise, right? We look at everything going on in our world. It doesn't matter what it is. We can talk about anything and everything, but we do so from a theological perspective. And a theological perspective is the idea, theology is the idea, the study, the knowledge of God, is where we're looking at everything going on in our world from a perspective that brings in the idea and the reality of God, all right? And when we speak of God, obviously we're speaking of the Christian understanding of God, the Christian God, the God of the Bible, and we try to bring this look. Everyone listening, you have a worldview, you have a perspective, and that worldview may involve God or it may exclude God. You may bring God into your worldview or you may exclude God, but everyone has a perspective on life. And this podcast is all about bringing a God theological perspective to life. And it may be a different perspective than you're used to hearing, but I think it's one that you may want to consider. Now, for all the normal listeners, I have to offer this kind of little warning. We're going to be talking about music, popular music, secular music, okay? And for some Christians, if you do that, they go crazy and you get into all the music wars sometimes that happens within Christianity. And look, I'm not here to tell you what to listen to or not listen to. I'm just going to say, here's a song. It's from a very popular artist. And if you know me, you know I'm a music fan, a gigantic music fan. Music plays a very big part of my life. So I would say that I'm definitely a fan of music, and I listen to a lot of things. I'm not here to get into an argument about what you think I should listen to or shouldn't listen to. I believe music provides a perspective on life. The artist may be speaking, may be giving a perspective that's something that's very real to them, or they may, in a sense, in the song, create a character and give you the perspective of that person in the song that they're writing about. It's not even really, it doesn't really reflect anything about them. They create a narrative, a story. The songs basically give you a story. They give you a character. They give you a perspective. You may agree with it. You may disagree with it. Just like in a movie. You may not agree with everything in a movie. It doesn't mean you have to follow it. It doesn't matter you have to agree with it. It just means it's telling you a story. And music does the exact same thing. Music can impact you based on the way the music is structured, the feeling, the emotional vibe the music gives you, and then you have the lyrics there as well, which gives you a perspective, a narrative, a story, a perspective. It gives you a perspective on life. And I love exploring that. I love listening to the way the music is structured, listening to going, oh, I like that. Oh, I don't like, what did they do there? I like the way they produced that. And then, so what I typically do when I listen to an album, I always say that I'm very careful not to offer too much of a perspective on an album unless I've listened to it 10 times, or a song until I've listened to it 10 times, because the first 3, 4, maybe 5 times, I'm just focusing on the music, on how it's structured, its production, what the different instruments are doing, how it's put together, what maybe the influences that come from it. And then maybe around the last 5 times, I really focus on the lyrical content. What's being said? What's the message here? And trying to understand it and trying to interpret it. So I really, really get into analyzing music. And I know that can generate some controversy, but I wish you would overlook all of the possible controversy you may have about me talking about music and just really listen to what needs to be said. So I'm going to be talking, basically I'm going to be talking, 90% of my audience today is going to have probably some disagreement with me. So I feel like I have to offer all of this warning at the outset. I hate doing that, but I feel that it's necessary. All right. So for new listeners, you're like, oh, wait, he's talking about that song. That's cool. Welcome. For those old listeners, like, wait, I hate when he talks about music because I don't like any music except, okay, I got that. Let's all just listen and see where we end up. And then maybe you can draw maybe you'll have a different opinion by the time we are done. All right. Now, in this episode, we're going to turn to an artist that I have been following for, it seems like a very long time. I've been telling people that I talk to music about, hey, you need to follow her. You need to watch her because I think she's amazing, super talented. I think she's going to, have a big impact on music moving forward. And finally she released a new album on, for me, Thursday night at 11 p.m., Friday midnight for others, depending on your time zone. But let's just say on Friday, she released an album. And I was excited. I've been waiting for the album. And I'm going to tell you, we're going to focus in on one track. The name of the artist, let me just tell you, is the New Zealand singer-songwriter Benee. Her name is spelled Benee, Benee. She turned 20 on January the 30th. January the 30th, I think she turned 20. And so she's 20 years of age, obviously very young. She has won a number of awards for, I think in 2019, she won 4 New Zealand Music Awards, Single of the Year, Best Solo Artist, Best Breakthrough Artist, and Best Pop Artist. And I've been following her and watching her, and I think she's amazing. I think she's super talented. I cannot wait to see where she's going to go as she develops as an artist. We could talk all day about that, but we're not here to talk about her career and where she's going. We're here to talk about a song from the new album. All right. So I'm going to pull up the new album really quick. I'm pulling it up on Apple Music because they have the lyrics there. The name of the album is Hey You X. Hey You X. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. That's how it's written. Hey You, the letter U, and letter X. Hey You X. And the album opens with the single "Happen to Me." Happen to Me. It's the first single. It's the first song on the album. I don't think it was the first single released on the album because she released a number of other singles like Night Garden, and she released some other singles as well. But it's the first track on the album, "Happen to Me." And I know this: the minute I put on the headphones and I hit play, immediately the music caught me, and I like the song ended and I hit repeat. I typically just go through the album, but I just kept hitting repeat. And so first the music really drew me in. And then when I started looking at the lyrics, I was like, wow, all right, there is so much here. So let's put it in its context. She was probably 19 when she probably started putting this song together. 19-year-old, 20-year-old young lady writing a song. And I think this song really captures a lot of kind of what people may be feeling right now in 2020. 2020 has been a year filled with so much craziness and turmoil and uncertainty. And especially if you're young. If you're young right now, 19, 20, whether you're in music or not in music, you're trying to figure out college. Okay, what's the job market going to look like? What like jobs, industries are having the layoffs, and this is happening, and this is happening. You're trying to figure out your future and things, and your social life has been messed up, and just so much uncertainty. And then, the election and all the different things happening right now. There's just a time of uncertainty. Can we say that we live in a time also maybe of great anxiety? There's been lots of discussion of people struggling with depression and anxiety and feelings of loneliness and isolation. There have been discussions about suicide rates. Lots of things happening in our world right now. So here's a young person, 19, 20, who writes a song that I think in some ways captures some of this. Now, she may have had her own perspective that she wanted to get across, and I haven't looked up her thoughts or perspective on the song, but we're going to take the lyrics apart. And I'm going to look at it from a theological perspective and throw out kind of a different way of looking, all right? Because I think this is very important, all right? Here we go. Here is the song. Let me open this up, make sure it doesn't start playing. Okay, it almost started playing. I don't want to get busted for a copyright violation. All right, here we go. Here's how the song begins. Again, Happen to Me by Benee from her brand new album. Here is the opening line of the album. Hope I don't die inside a plane. What an opening line to an album. Hope I don't die inside a plane. Now that seems like a random thought, like I hope I don't die inside a plane, but it kind of begins to open up, at least for this track. I haven't figured out how this track fits into maybe the album, and if there's kind of a narrative or a theme that runs through the album. But as far as that line, that really just hit me. Hope I don't die inside a plane. That seems random, but at the same time, you know, it kind of gives you this idea, this feeling that this person is kind of thinking a lot about death, about life. And again, I think a lot of people may be having some of those kinds of thoughts. So I just really, that sometimes I love looking at what the opening line is of an album. I love looking at that. And Hope I Don't Die Inside a Plane, I think, is a great opening line. It really drew me in, right? Hope I don't die inside a plane. I'd like to die a better way. Now, that we all wish we could choose the way we die. We all wish we could. But you know what? We can't. And that's the reality. Like, I don't want to die inside a plane. I like to die a better way, but we all know it's out of our control. So these lyrics are immediately hitting us with the reality of our own mortality and the reality of what we can and cannot control. Right? Hope I don't die inside a plane. I'd like to die a better way. And if I live to an old age, I would have seen everything change. Now, I love that. If I live to an old age, I would have seen everything change. Well, yeah, that's another reality. So it's the reality of death. It's the reality of our lack of control. And it's a reality that everything around us is in a constant state of flux. It's a constant state of change. The longer you live, everything that you knew will no longer be, it's going to change. And a lot of older people have they struggle with that. Once it starts changing, they're like, they want it to go back to the way it was, but the way it was is gone. It's just not the way life works. Things change. And it's just amazing that as a young age, articulating some very powerful concepts. And if I lived to an old age, I would have seen everything change. I understand why people leave, but leaving seems scary to me. Now, I understand why people leave. I'm assuming what she means by that. I understand why people die. Is that where I think she's going? But leaving seems scary to me. The being confronted with the reality that we're all going to leave. Be confronted with the reality that we're all going to die. I think about these things too much. My mind likes to wind itself up, and I don't get a lot of sleep. Now, that's like, here's someone struggling with life. I like that reality. I wish everyone would stop what they're doing for a few minutes and consider these big questions about life and death and what's happening around us, your own mortality. There's so many things that as human beings we fight and disagree over, but this is something that we all have in common. We're alive, but that life is going to come to an end. And that we realize that we have very little control of many things are beyond our control. And that everything around us is going to change. Relationships are going to change. Culture is going to change. People are going to change. We're going to change. Physically, emotionally, mentally, that we're in a constant state of flux. This gets to the core of what we are as human beings. We focus so much on our differences, but this really gets to some really issues. She goes on to say, I think about these things too much. My mind likes to wind itself up, and I don't get a lot of sleep. Because what if they happen to me? Because what if they happen to me? What if they happen to me? She asked that question. What if they happen to me? What happens? Like she's dealing with the uncertainty. What if it happens to me? Well, it is going to happen to all of us. What if my room burns down in flames and I die in my sleep and never wake? You say I shouldn't be this way, but I don't think I can change. I think about these things too much. My mind likes to wind itself up, and I don't get a lot of sleep. Because what if they happen to me? Because what if they happen to me? What if they happen to me? I think about these things too much. My mind likes to wind itself up. I don't get a lot of sleep. Because what if they happen to me? What if they happen to me? That's a great question. It's a great question. And the question, and almost in a roundabout way, she's asking the question, but in a sense, I think it's almost like in a rhetorical way, because she knows, deep down, she knows the answer. It's going to happen to her. It's going to happen to all of us. We're all going to leave. We're all going to die. We're all going to face the inevitable, change and death, and the reality that so much is out of our control. And she's like processing this. She's asking those tough questions. And I believe that, and I really want Christians to hear what I'm about to say here. I think for a lot of young people who ask these very difficult questions, they don't see Christianity as providing any answer, because I think for many, they see Christianity as simply a belief system that's against a lot of things and that condemns a lot of things, but they don't see Christianity as presenting anything in a positive way. Like sometimes I think Christianity is known for what we are against, not for what we believe and what Christianity offers. I think sometimes we know the Christians are known for what we condemn, but not what Christianity ultimately offers. And Christianity offers a very different perspective to life. See, I believe in this song, what is happening is that Benee is presenting to us a horizontal view of life. Right? A very horizontal view of life. Like life is what you see here. I'm going to use a biblical phrase for those who may not know the Bible. Let me throw this phrase out there. Under the sun. She's seeing life from a horizontal, under the sun perspective, right? That she just sees life from what she sees. That like kind of a materialistic view of life. This is it. And so you live, life's going to change. You don't know when you're going to die. You have no power over it. What if this happens to me? Well, what's the answer? What if it happens to you? Well, from a horizontal view of life, you live. You don't know when you're going to die. You have no real reason. There's no transcendent purpose to it. You live and then you die and it's over. There's nothing more. From a horizontal perspective of life, what's even the purpose of living? You hope you can reach that old age, but even if you do, while you're reaching that old age, everything is changing around you. Things are changing. Friendships fall apart. Relationships fall apart. Things happen. Pain, suffering. So what's really the purpose in all of it? A horizontal perspective of life leads you to a screaming out, vanity of vanities, or meaningless. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? What if it happens to me? What am I left with? And I think a lot of young people are filled with a little bit of despair, a little bit of questioning, a little bit of confusion. And so they grab on to things that try to give them some purpose, some cause. But sometimes, what is even the reason for that cause? Why even pursue that cause? Why even pursue this idea of equality or justice? For what reason? Who defines what justice is? Who defines what equality is? Who defines what right is? They're left trying to figure out the world from a horizontal perspective. They look at everything under the sun. They don't look above. There's no spiritual reality brought in. There's no God. There's nothing transcendent. It's just a materialistic view of life, which I think ultimately leads to despair. You live, you don't know how long you're going to live, and then you die. And maybe it's a good life. Maybe it's a horrible life, but a lot of it's out of your control. There's got to be something more. There's got to be a different perspective. And I think that there is a different perspective, and I think it's a vertical perspective where we look above the sun and we look to the fact that there is a God who created us, and our purpose in life, our meaning is not found under the sun. It's found above the sun. It's found in the Creator. It's found in Him. That our purpose in life is serving Him, and that life here is not the end. That we serve God so that we experience an eternal life, that there is a perspective, and that death is not the end. Death is simply a doorway to a different existence. And that everything may change here, but God doesn't change. Everything here may fall apart, but the spiritual doesn't fall apart. The spiritual is eternal, while everything here is temporal. Everything here is dust. And even if it happens to me, it's not the end. There's something more. There's something else to live for. There's something else to hold on to. There's something else to hope in. So let me just throw out some biblical thoughts here. Some biblical thoughts here, all right? You can focus on a vertical existence where you're looking up, you're looking towards God, or you can look at a horizontal existence where you're just looking at the material, the fleshly, the earthly, what you can see. Let's look at some scriptures here. If you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, now some of those maybe listening to this are not familiar with the Bible, but if in the Old Testament, there's a book called Ecclesiastes. This book was written by Solomon, who was the king, and he had money, he had power, he had everything, and he set out to find out the meaning of life. And Ecclesiastes is kind of, think of it as his diary, his journal, with him trying to go, why am I alive? What's the purpose of living? And he really articulates this idea of a vertical existence versus a horizontal existence. Let me explain. Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. So the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. All right? Look what he says in verse 2. Ecclesiastes 1:2. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, he starts off here by saying vanity is another word, meaningless, 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 meaningless. He starts off by declaring meaningless, meaningless, saith the preacher, meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. That sounds like a very depressing, it's all meaningless. It's all useless. It's all empty. It's all purpose. There's no purpose. It's all vain. It sounds very depressing. And then look what he says in verse 3. Here gives you the key. Ecclesiastes 1:3. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? So under the sun, if we just look at our life under the sun, what's the purpose of anything? What's the meaning of anything? And look what he says. What's going to happen? One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. In other words, you have one generation, they're going to die. Everything's going to change. Then the next generation comes, and then they're going to die. Then the next generation comes, and they're going to die. It's just an endless cycle of death, an endless cycle of, it's going to happen to you. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where it arose. The wind goeth towards the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. In other words, everything just goes in this endless cycle of futility. Like, what's the purpose of all of it? And look what he says. Verse 8. All things are full of labor. Men cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Right? So he's like, there's no real purpose in any of this. And so he sets out in the book of Ecclesiastes to try to find purpose, to try to find meaning. He sets out to find it. And he tries everything. Education, women, wine, laughter. He tries everything over and over. He says meaningless, 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 until finally at the end of his journal, he says, he finally realizes what the purpose of life is. It's God, serving God. In other words, he stopped looking at life from a horizontal perspective. He looked at it from a vertical perspective, which then opened his eyes. So you know what? Yeah, things are going to change. Yeah, we may die, but there's something beyond the material. There's something beyond life. There's something beyond this fleshly life. There's a spiritual existence that will last for eternity. There is a God who doesn't change. The world changes. There is a morality that doesn't change. There's a God that doesn't change. There's a reality that doesn't change. And that is the spiritual, the vertical reality. The horizontal reality is just an endless cycle of vanity. Now, having this vertical perspective, if you have the vertical perspective, it begins to impact a lot of things. Go to Matthew chapter 6 if you have a Bible. If you're not, just listen. Matthew chapter 6, this is in the New Testament. Matthew chapter 6. Look what is written here. Matthew chapter 6, these are the words of Jesus. Jesus is speaking here. Matthew chapter 6, and look what he says to us. Matthew chapter 6, verse 25. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life. This is idea. Don't worry. Don't be filled with anxiety. Don't be anxious, okay, about your life. Don't be filled with anxiety and worry. This song happened to me. There's a little bit of anxiety there. Jesus says, don't have any anxiety. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to drink. Don't worry about about your body. Don't worry about what you're going to put on. Don't worry, because your body, your life is more than meat, and your body more than raiment. In other words, your life, your existence, it's more than meat and clothes. Your life is more than just what happens here in the horizontal. There's something more to your life. Look what he says. Behold the fowls of the air. Look at the birds. For they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are you not much better than they? Which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? If you're short and you can think and think and think and think, you can't grow. In other words, Jesus is acknowledging there's some things you don't control. There's some things you cannot change. So don't be anxious about it. Don't be fearful about it. He goes and consider. And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Look at the flowers in the field. They're not all worried. They're not filled with anxiety. Think about them. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which is today and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Wherefore take no thought what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, or what you shall, or how you should be clothed. For all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of all these things. In other words, your focus is not here on the horizontal. Your focus is on the vertical reality of God. And that should then have an impact on your horizontal existence, so that you're not overwhelmed with anxiety and fear and concern, because you're trusting in something different. He goes on to say, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first the kingdom of God. In other words, focus on the vertical reality more than the horizontal reality, right? And then look at what he says in verse 34, Matthew chapter 6. Take therefore no thought for tomorrow. Don't be worried about tomorrow. For tomorrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't be preoccupied with tomorrow. Just focus on today. And guess what you focus on today? The kingdom of God. You focus on God. You focus on the vertical, not the horizontal. And then go to James chapter 4, verse 13. James chapter 4, verse 13 is another verse that kind of speaks to these things. James 4:13, we read this: Go to now, yet that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. In other words, don't say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to do this and tomorrow I'm going to do this, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know. And guess your life is merely a vapor. You're here for a short period of time and then you're gone. So there's got to be something more. And so what does James tell us? For we ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. In other words, we should focus that there's things that we cannot change. We don't know what's going to happen. Life is short. We focus on God, and if God wills it, God is in control. Completely. That's a vertical perspective, not a horizontal perspective. Horizontal perspective, we want to think we're in charge, but then we get confronted over and over. We're not in charge. There's so much that happens that is beyond our control. Well, does those things that happen, is there any meaning to it? Is there any purpose to it? Or do you just lay in bed hoping your room doesn't burn down and that you die in your sleep? That's a horizontal perspective. And then the book of Isaiah, Old Testament book of Isaiah, we read these words. Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. Isaiah 26, 3. Speaking of God, thou will keep him, keep us, God will keep you and I in perfect peace when our mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. That perfect peace comes when our mind is fixed on God. We can have perfect peace. We can remove all of this anxiety. We can remove all of this fear. We can remove all this concern if our mind is fixed on God. If it stayed on him, then there's perfect peace. There's a peace that passeth all understanding. All of that anxiety, all of that worry about what's going to happen now and what's going to happen this and is this going to happen to me? I love the fact that she's honest because, look, even as Christians, let's be honest, sometimes we are filled with the same anxiety and the same worry. And we've got to be reminded that, look, stop looking at everything from a horizontal perspective. Look at it from a vertical perspective. Put our focus on God. That's where we put our focus, and we put our focus on God. If we put our focus on God, then we can have peace and we can have some tranquility. And this is what the world needs to hear right now. The world needs to hear that, look, yes, there's concern about death and disease and financial destruction and all these things. But guess what? Our hope is that for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, that if we believeth on him, listen, we will not perish. We will have everlasting life. Our hope is eternal. Our hope is not in this world. Everything here is going to perish. We're going to die. The world's going to end. We're all going to die. We have to focus on something that is eternal. There is a vertical reality that you must see. And you can live your life looking at the horizontal, and you can focus on that boyfriend, that girlfriend, getting a job, having a baby. You can focus on love, romance. You can focus on everything on the horizontal. But it's all, listen, ultimately it's going to lead you not content. It's going to leave you unsatisfied. It's all going to ultimately change. It's ultimately going to go away. You've got to have something different. There's the vertical reality. And what we have to offer to a culture and to a generation of young people who may be looking and not, look, they think they're like, we're going to pursue social justice, and they give their life to that. They think that that's somehow a purpose. But sometimes they don't even really have a reason why something is moral or immoral. They don't even really have a true reason why they can. Who decides what's moral? Who decides what's not moral? Like there's so much they don't have. And sometimes as Christians, as parents, what we sometimes speak to the younger generation about what Christianity condemns, and we don't offer any of the positives that Christianity has, which is a vertical perspective of life, which is a life of purpose, of meaning, of hope, of putting aside anxiety, of trusting in God, an eternal reality. Now, yes, sometimes young people will tell you, I don't care about your vertical reality. Get out of my face. And you have to allow them to live their life. And as they run down that horizontal road, hopefully at some point they're going to pull over on that horizontal road and go, there's got to be more than this. And then you can come driving up next to them going, I'm glad you finally asked that question. Let me remind you of what there is more. There's this vertical reality. But sometimes I think we see the kid pulled over on the side of the road in despair, and we want to go up and go, now I want you to realize that that's wrong, and that's sin, and that's sin, and that's sin. Now there's a time to speak against sin, but sometimes all they think that we have is a message of condemnation, not a message of hope, not a message of peace and eternity and eternal life and a vertical perspective. I think sometimes they just know that we condemn everything. And yes, there is a speaking against sin, but there's something we are offering eternal hope. And that hope is found not in this horizontal existence. Our hope is found in God, who sent his son, Jesus Christ. And if we will put our faith and trust in him, we can experience a salvation and have the hope of eternity. And that life has a purpose and a meaning beyond the horizontal. And that purpose is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. That's where you can find contentment. This horizontal existence will leave you broken, filled with despair, discouraged, discontented, frustrated, lonely, and maybe to the point of wanting to end it. Benee asks, because what if they happen to me? She asked the question, what if they happen to me? The Christian response is, well, ultimately, these things are going to happen to you. But what if they happen to us? The Christian perspective is to die is gain. The end of my earthly existence is the beginning of my eternal existence. My eternal existence in the presence of God, where there's no more pain, or there's no more suffering, and there's no more death. Now, I'm not condemning what Benee wrote here. I'm not. She's offering a perspective. She's just offering a perspective that I think is a horizontal perspective of life, and I'm offering the vertical perspective. and listen, we all can relate to her perspective here. We've all felt some of those same feelings, even as Christians. So I'm not condemning it, and I'm not saying that I'm not getting into that whole, every song's got to, I'm not getting into the way Christians sometimes talk about music. I think it's a beautiful song. It's a powerful song, but it's a song filled with a little anxiety, a little, concerned about death and life. And I just think that there's a perspective that needs to be considered. So there is my thoughts on the song Happen To Me by Benee from her brand new album, which is, hang on, what's the name of it? I don't want to give the wrong name here. I've focused so much on the song Happen To Me, I forgot the name of the album. Hey UX. Hey UX. I know there's probably a different way of saying that, but Hey UX. That's the name of the new album by Benee. It's available on all streaming services. The first track of the song is Happen To Me. And just so that you know, there are 3 tracks, I believe, on the album. 3 tracks. Yeah, 3 tracks that contain explicit lyrics. So just so that you know. Yes, I've talked about a number of tracks on this album already on podcasts when they were released as singles before the album was ready. But there we go. I think here are the notes about the album from Apple Music. I think what helps me to be so vulnerable with my writing is that I don't think about who's going to be listening to it, Benee tells Apple Music. If I did, I'd freak out. It's weird because I release it for all of these people to listen to, yet I can't talk to my closest friends about it. The New Zealand singer and songwriter's debut album, Hey UX, is filled with honesty and anxiety and mental health and heartbreak and all of those little thoughts that wiggle around in our heads and keep us up at night. Though we all experience it, most of us can't harness those feelings and turn them into lovely, innovative, and thoughtful alt-pop songs. But for Benee, it's more of a necessity than anything else. I'm really terrible at telling people if I'm feeling really bad. I just won't talk about my feelings or emotions. I bottle it up and then vomit it onto a page when I'm writing. All right. And she goes on to talk more about her experience. But yes, you can hear the anxiety. You can hear some of the loneliness. You can hear some of the concern. And I think she captures what a lot of young people who may never say it, may never tell you. Like, you may look at your young person or a young person, the young generation, and act like they could care less about anything. But I think late at night, laying on their bed, I think they do have questions about death and life and purpose and existence. And I think Christianity needs to say, hey, young people, we offer a vertical perspective on life. You're viewing it from a horizontal. There is a different perspective. But I think all they see sometimes from the church is they're against this, they're against that, they're against this. They know what we're against. They don't know what we offer. And have we simply offered them condemnation? Or have we offered them, hey, that we offer a perspective on life that is so radical that it could have a profound impact on that anxiety and discontentment and loneliness and depression and discouragement that you're feeling? Maybe it's something for us all to consider. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.